샛별.
I'm gonna do the creepypasta. My roommate has been in the shower for more than 4 hours. This sounds like if you were roommates with me, that's just how it would be. I'm gonna be really honest with you. That's just how it would be. So I got home around 11 p.m. Late night at the office turned into an even later night at the bar. About 4 drinks deep at this point, and I'm tired, just about ready to fall asleep as I stumble through the doorway. I lay down on the couch and reach for my bag of joints and spark one up as I pull YouTube up on my laptop. Well, yeah, that sounds like a good night. I'm in the middle of watching some luxury cruise tour, close to passing out, when I hear the front door open. I sit up and turn my head slightly, just enough to see my roommate coming in. He hangs his jacket in the closet and doesn't say anything and walks slowly to his room, which is normal enough. I'd been living with him for about 3 months, long enough for me to pick up on most of his tendencies. The guy doesn't really talk unless spoken to, which was far from the problem for me. He also generally kept things clean on his end, never causing much in the way of problems. I really couldn't complain. Well, you're complaining now. So I go back to watching YouTube, and about 5 minutes later, I hear the shower in his room turning on. Once again, nothing strange. At this point, I'm watching bare knuckle boxing highlights with my eyes half open, maybe 1 or 2 minutes away from passing out. I remember waking up in darkness, my head hurting, my throat dry as hell. I sat up slowly, waiting for the grogginess to settle into something manageable. Once I did, I grabbed my phone, checked the time. Around 3:30 a.m. from what I remember. I was starving, so I got up, began walking towards the fridge, and then I noticed it, a soft, ever-present noise in the background. It took me a few seconds to really recognize what it was. The shower. Suddenly, events of last night began replaying in my head. Drinking at the bar, Ubering home, laptop couch, my roommate coming home, the shower turning on. Oh. I stood there for a while, trying to make sense of it. Maybe he went to bed and forgot to turn it off. I shook my head. There's no way that happened, I thought. Maybe he slipped and fell? Realizing the implications of this, I rushed towards his room but found the bathroom door locked. I began pounding on it. Hey man, are you alright? No response. I considered kicking the door down, but decided to call 911 before I did that. I took my phone out, preparing to dial when I noticed that I had an unread text, one from my roommate. Hey man, I couldn't sleep, so I went over to my girlfriend's place. Not sure when I'll be back. Sent 2 hours ago. I thought he was in the shower. 2 hours ago. 2 hours when he got home. He went to the shower. I look at the bathroom door, then back down to my phone. Everything about this was wrong. First of all, my roommate barely texts me, and certainly never to tell me that he's going out. Second of all, I know for a fact that he's single and has been for a while. And third of all, who the fuck was in my shower then? Oh, hello! Welcome back. I think it was Wednesday. How are you today? My head's starting to spin at this point, and I get out of there, go back into the living room, and turn on the lights. I'm pacing around in a circle, trying to follow the plot while also trying to ignore the shower, a noise that I never could have imagined being so dreadful in any context. I don't know, man. Like, just at that point, just call the police. Like, my roommate texted me and said he's at his girlfriend's house, but he left the shower on and his door to his bathroom is locked, and also he doesn't have a girlfriend, so I'm kind of suspicious, and I think that someone else should handle it and not me. That's it. That's all you have to say. All right. Sometime later, I hear something vibrating on the kitchen counter. I move towards it and see that it's a phone. My roommate's phone. The panic begins setting in, and immediately I grab my keys and run out of the apartment. I make my way down the hall and take the stairs down to the lobby, but even that doesn't seem far enough away, so I make my way over to the McDonald's across the street. I sit there for a while, considering calling the cops, but for some reason feeling too nervous to do so. But even though there's hardly anybody in there, the place begins to feel suffocating, and I decide to leave, walking back out onto the empty streets. It's like 3:30 in the morning at this point. Are McDonald's really open at 3:30 in the morning? I'm good. Thank you for asking. I'm glad you're good. It's Friday. I think McDonald's used to be open 24/7, but none of them around here are anymore since like the lockdown and stuff. Almost immediately I get this feeling that I'm being watched, and I feel my gaze drifting up towards the apartment. Soon I'm looking at my balcony and I see somebody standing there. A dark figure stood completely straight, stiff to the point where it nearly resembles a mannequin, but it isn't one. If I look closely, I can see it just slightly swaying. I froze in place, my mind hardly able to understand or accept what I was seeing. It's not my roommate. It's too tall. In fact, it's too tall to be anybody I know. Its head nearly scraping the bottom of the balcony above. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make out any of its details. The darkness and distance may have been enough to explain that away, but there was something about it that drove me towards a different conclusion. That this thing simply possessed no details that could have been observed. That the only element of its composition was that of unadulterated darkness. Whoa. Whoa. Of course, my gut instinct was to get the hell away from it, but the voice in my head was telling me that if I were to try and run, this thing would end up following me. I went back into the McDonald's instead, locking myself in the bathroom as I finally dialed 911. I told the operator that somebody had broken into my place, but that I had gotten out of there without them noticing, but they were still in there. It was a story that most accurately represented the situation without making me come across as batshit. That's honestly, yeah, that's what you should do. Go to the police. Oh, my dog's tweaking on the ground. Oh no, what'd you do? Does he have the zoomies? The operator told me that they'd be sending somebody over for me to hang tight. I left the bathroom, waiting at the table closest to the exit until I could see the red and blue lights cutting through the darkness. I went outside to meet the cops, looking up the balcony to find it empty, though the door to the living room had been left open. They pelted me with a bunch of questions that I found difficult to answer. Is the intruder armed? Do I have any idea who it might be? What are their intentions? I told them that I didn't know, that I couldn't figure it out, but they just kept on asking. Soon I was practically yelling at them to go up there and check it out for themselves, and I suppose the terror in my voice was enough for them to begin taking this seriously. They told me to wait by the entrance, and I watched on as they entered the building. Ugh. I was out there for a long time, growing increasingly anxious at the thought of what they were going to tell me when they came down. A few minutes later, the silence was broken by a single muffled gunshot. My heart dropped into my stomach, and I continued to wait there, unsure of what to do otherwise. 20 more minutes of silence, and the officers still hadn't come down. Soon I could hear more of them approaching in the distance. What? Is she spinning? Oh, I love the spinny zoomies. That's the best. Before I knew it, 4 more cop cars had pulled up around me, and the scene had fallen into chaos. Officers shouting over each other and into their radios, more questions being hurled my way, none of which I was able to answer. The next few sequences were mostly a blur, but I remember the building being evacuated, the tenants frightened and confused as they were ushered out, while the officers became more and more frantic. I remember hearing more scattered gunshots, some screaming, other noises that were difficult to make sense of. There were a few lapses in my memory after that, but I recall being pushed into the back of a police car. After being driven to the station, I was led into one of the interrogation rooms where I found 2 nondescript men in suits waiting for me. They didn't introduce themselves and immediately went into a series of questions, each more bizarre than the last. Whoa. Hold on, I need a drink. Okay. What company was your roommate employed by? What was the nature of his job? How many different people have been inside your apartment since your roommate moved in? Have you ever heard voices inside the apartment from the hours of midnight to 3 a.m.? Voices that did not belong to your roommate? Have you ever seen a circle of people standing outside the apartment from the hours of midnight to 3 a.m.? People that were exceptionally tall? And one of the most unsettling ones. Have you ever seen somebody standing at the foot of your bed upon waking up between the hours of midnight to 3 a.m. only for them to disappear moments later? If so, do you remember what they looked like? Any distinct features? I would be checking out. I'm done. At this point, like, can I just have a new apartment and can you compensate me for my emotional damages? Because I'm over this. I'm over it. I'm done. As they continued probing me, my mind began conjuring up some of the strange shit that had happened after my roommate moved in, shit I had written off as figments of my imagination, simply because I had no other explanation for them. I did hear the voices, always coming from the room next to mine where my roommate slept. I was always so tired when I heard them, but I do remember it either sounding like a young woman or a man with an extremely deep voice. I could never make out any words. It always sounded like gibberish. And then there was that one time where I went to the bathroom in the middle of the night. Still half asleep, I didn't bother turning on the light as I entered. But as my eyes began adjusting in the dark, I could have sworn that somebody was already sitting on the toilet. Somebody extremely tall. Bro, mind your business. He really had to go potty. Oh, I lost my place. Of course, when I turned on the lights, nope, nothing was there. It was easy to chalk it up as a product of late night drowsiness at the time, and I had never really thought about it since. Yeah, do you guys ever wake up in the middle of the night and go to the bathroom and you just like see someone sitting on your toilet and like it's just the wakey uppies. It's just your imagination waking up, you know? Oh my god. After doing my best to give them useful information, the suits spent a good few minutes taking notes on their phones. Once they were done, they sat up quickly, told me that they'd be in touch before leaving the room. A cop came in a few minutes later and told me that since I couldn't return to the apartment, they would set me up in a nearby hotel until they were able to get the situation under control, and that I should stay put until they gave me a call. What happened? I asked him. What did you guys find up there? He stared at me for a long time, not as if he were deep in thought, but as if he held a deep aversion for what he was considering telling me. Eventually, he just shook his head. I don't know, he said. I mean, I really don't know. I nodded. I tried to smile, though I'm sure it didn't come across very well. It's the next day now and I'm in a hotel. Of course I couldn't sleep, couldn't really eat. The officer hasn't called me yet. When I tried searching up information about the evacuation on the internet, all I could find were articles claiming that it was due to a fire. A fucking fire. Update. I just fell asleep and I just woke up. It's 1 a.m. now and I can hear the shower. Bro, where does your roommate work? What's he doing? What are those people doing? Bro, he heard the shower. Call the cops again. They need to come back. That was, my roommate has been in the shower for more than 4 hours. That was a good one. When Ben died, he made very little noise. It was the computers that alerted me. Shrill alarms and flashing lights. I hadn't even gotten out of my sleeping bag before my smartwatch had lit up with half a dozen messages about system failures. Astronaut 1, heart rate monitor failure. Astronaut 1, skin conductance. Conductance, that's the word. Skin conductance monitor failure. Astronaut 1, VO2 monitor failure. The situation didn't sink in until I was shaking an unresponsive Ben. White eyes rolling back into his skull, blood pooling in his ears like red jelly. I don't know that word. Viscosity. Sure. Mass. No gravity. It made me nauseous to look at. HQ would later say Ben died from an aneurysm. 1 in a million. A freak death that just happened to occur in low Earth orbit. So what now? I asked, after all the panic had died down and the reality of my situation finally settled in. HQ sent me a rarely used or discussed document that outlined what I'd have to do. Bodies pose a unique threat in microgravity, it explained. All the order becomes disordered. What is solid turns into liquid. What is liquid turns into gas. First thing I needed to do was to put Ben's body somewhere that had no oxygen and was freezing cold. Somewhere he would pose no danger to himself or me. Isolated but easily retrievable. The conclusion was obvious. I knew that they'd suggest before I even reached to that part of the booklet. It happened so fast that Ben was still warm when I put him in the special bag designed to endure the vacuum of space. I kept expecting him to protest as I pulled at stiffening limbs and manipulated swelling joints. Every step of the process, every zip, every bit of Velcro. I had to remind myself he wasn't going to complain. It felt intimate, but it wasn't. Intimacy requires 2 people. By that point, Ben was just meat. Oh. Morbid. The spacewalk itself was something else. The bag that surrounded Ben's body inflated the vacuum, and I instinctively felt the urge to undo what I've done. There was a body in there, and bodies aren't meant to have so little between them and outer space. When I touched the bag, I could still feel him beneath the paper-thin material. The crease of an elbow, the bump of his nose. By the time I reached my destination, his body already felt brittle. Attaching him to the station was easy enough on a technical level. Leaving him there was against every instinct I had. After that, there was no pretending he was coming back. A day later, I began to pack his things away. There was a catharsis in it that I found calming. I cataloged his belongings with thin detachment. Most of his things were dry and uninteresting. Photos of him with a dog, a copy of a Michael Shea book, a certificate of excellence from NASA that he received when he was 10. He discovered a comet. He told me during our first meeting. Backyard with a telescope. NASA let him name it and everything. That was how he knew he wanted to be an astronaut. Described it as a calling. Ben was like that, a real-life Boy Scout. In life, he'd had no edges. Damn. He was just a run-of-the-mill good guy. You'd think, given our history, we'd be close. Two men selected based on extensive psychological profiling. Together, we had simulated multiple missions to Mars, two on the ground, one in space, all of them highly secretive. An official mission to Mars was meant to be next, at which point the whole project would be made public. But the key to having two people work alone. Oh my God. I'm starting over. But the key to having two people work together alone for nearly an entire year isn't to find two guys who are best friends forever. It's finding people who won't grate on one another, neither hate nor love. Two men who enjoy their company but don't mind one another. Ben and I had become acquainted over all that time together, but it wasn't like we were brothers in arms. We worked so well precisely because there was no meat to the friendship, no stakes, nothing to argue over. To me, Ben was a nice guy, but that was just all. I figured he was plain and simple all the way down. No dark secrets, no real problems to speak of. The journal changed that. God, I need another drink. Okay. It was taped to the inside of a panel of a computer at his workstation. He must have hidden it close to his things, somewhere out of sight but easily retrievable. Frayed leaves and yellowed pages, like something of an ancient artifact. The last thing I expected to find in the space station. I almost mistook its leather cover for some sort of personal Bible, the sort of well-worn tome held up by a preacher making exclamations about the devil, but inside it was handwritten and hardly in keeping with a Bible. Oh. Scribbles, shapes, phrases repeated and dissected. Some of it was even in binary. It seemed like the ravings of a child or a lunatic. I thought it was maybe a mindfulness exercise, empty-headed doodling to help him get his head straight during stressful moments, but that didn't explain why he'd hidden it, and why the numbers and pages seemed to strangely organized. I don't know how to describe it exactly, except to say that there was a vague impression that it meant something to the person who'd made it. Every last gram on a shuttle is accounted for. What you bring up with you, it can't be some random crap you want last minute. Ben would have had to clear the journal. I'm assuming he kept the contents secret. One look at what he'd been writing, and NASA would have held him in a psych eval by the end of the day. But the book's size and weight would have to be logged and accounted for. It could not have gotten on the station by accident, so I knew immediately that Ben had wanted it for something. I studied it for over an hour to figure out what it was. Flicking from one page to the next, glaring at rows of numbers, strange fractals, something that looked like a cross between an eye and a textbook drawing of an atom. Given the way that his writing and art skills developed throughout the book, I began to suspect he'd been adding to it since his childhood, which was just another layer to the growing mystery. Hi, Ahmed. How are you? I thought I was never going to get any insight into the book until about 3/4 of the way through, I came across yet another page filled with rows and rows of numbers. Only this time, one of the strings was underlined with a single word that had been scratched and ragged and angry next to it. The only bit of English, or in any human language, in all those pages. The only thing written in a way that could make sense to a living human. The word itself made me stop dead in my tracks, made my blood run cold. 170318042636. Aneurysm. Been better? Oh no! I hope you have a better day than you've been having. The suspicion that came over me felt like a kind of madness. I told myself I had to be nuts when I checked the data from Ben's biomonitor, that I had to be crazy to even entertain the notion, but the information recorded by several different machines confirmed it. Ben's exact time of death was the 17th of March, 2018, 0426 hours and 36 seconds. Oh, so that's the 170318042636. That's crazy. I don't think I moved for a good 15 minutes after that. I just stared at the data as my mind worked its way around a giant impossible realization. Ben knew he was going to die. Of course, I tried to rationalize this. Anyone would. I came up with half a dozen reasons he'd written what he'd written. None of them was comforting, although they at least fit in with a more rational worldview. Take, for example, the idea that Ben had killed himself at that exact moment in time to meet some sort of prophecy he'd scrawled days or even hours before. Was that a good thing? What did it mean for me? Ignore the logistical issues. What poison can be timed to the second? Let's just say that's what he did. That left the hair-raising question of why. And there was no comfortable answer that I could see. Of course, I went through that book with a fine-tooth comb looking for any more clues. I wish I hadn't. I eventually found another word, this one closer to the very end of the journal. Another date and timestamp, one that lay 6 weeks in the future, and another word scratched painfully into the paper by a clumsy fist. Immolation. Whoa. Thank you for 2K likes on TikTok, guys. Appreciate that. All right. There's a little break, and then it goes. Permission denied. I bit my lip and took a deep breath. What about the station's integrity? I asked. No sign of any issue from external cameras, they replied. I can hear something banging on the hull, I told them. Nothing is visible on the cameras. That's why I need to go take a look, I wrote. It's hard to argue with a computer. You can't shoot at a death glare. HQ could have easily arranged video calls, but really they wanted the distance, made it easier to say no. Solo spacewalk is incredibly dangerous, they quickly wrote back. Microphones in station hull are reporting nothing of concern. Usual impact from debris. Nothing that corroborates reports of external tapping. Permission for spacewalk is denied. I made no further response, but instead closed the screen and wondered if they were being entirely truthful. The tapping sound, coming and going over the last few days, was unmistakable even over all those worrying machines and monitors. Space stations are loud. They even give us earplugs to handle it. But whatever was out there was somehow louder. Or perhaps, given the circumstances, I was just sensitive to the thought of something, anything out there. There was no denying that it annoyed me. Just one of those sounds I found impossible to block out, like water dripping in a bathtub at 3 a.m. No sense of order, not on a surface level, but something maybe underneath. Some sense or reason, some kind of regularity that the brain detects and can't let go of. Whoa. Oh, also, we're 6 away from the follower goal on TikTok. That's crazy. All right. How could the microphones possibly miss it? Sleep was getting progressively difficult. At times I thought the station was under some kind of hidden stress, materials freezing and warming in irregular ways. No atmosphere, no conduction of heat. Things get hot in the sun rays. Objects warm and cool to both extremes. This is routine stuff for anything coming up in space, of course, but it didn't stop me thinking about all of the ways the station was just a pile of metal that could come undone, could break and tear, bend and stretch, like watching the wing of your plane wobble during turbulence. It's an uncomfortable reminder that you're just a monkey in a fancy toy. Damn. Don't talk about yourself like that, bro. Well, and what if something had come loose? At first I stuck to this notion strictly, asking myself, what if some antenna or strap or a bit of metal had gotten loose and was banging against the hull? That would be bad. But of course, that wasn't really what I was thinking. It's what I wrote to HQ about over and over and over. But what was really on my mind was the thought that maybe somehow he had gotten loose. And of course, that's not so silly, right? The specially designed bag he was in, the one that would vent any gases produced by decomposition while maintaining his body's integrity, was brand spanking new. Now, know how many times it's been tested? Never. Never ever. Ben was the first, so of course it might come loose. Just because it's space-age technology doesn't mean it's sophisticated. He was strapped to the outside like a Christmas tree to the family sedan. Maybe, I wondered, one of the straps had broken, and now he was thumping against the side of the ship every now and again. Whoa. I got really distracted by Minecraft parkour. Hold on. Where was I? Okay. Never mind that there wasn't anything out there to prompt that kind of buffeting. No air, no wind. If he'd come loose, he'd just flow a little further away. But something was making that noise, and I worried almost constantly that it was him. Oh, so he's strapped. He had to put the guy in a bag and then strap him to the side of the ship, and he's hearing a knocking sound, and he's like, oh, well, maybe it came loose and it's like knocking against the wall. But in space there's nothing, like no wind or anything to make things come loose. So there's no reason that it should have come loose. And so he's like, what if it's him? What if he's in that bag? What if he's the one knocking on the wall? That's creepy. That's scary. Only problem I had was cameras, lots, and all of them every single time showed the same thing. The bag barely changed from what I saw from when I last saw it in person, strapped firmly and securely to the station's hull. That should have reassured me. Should have, but it didn't. Something was out there tapping at the hull, on and off. No pattern, no reason, no correlation. It came and went, seemingly choosing its moments to bother me the most. Maybe it's like Morse code. Sleep is difficult for multiple reasons. The tapping was bad enough, but lately my nightmares had taken a strange turn. Black, cold. In them, I was trapped and suffocating in a film. Freezing cold, nonstop agony, fighting furiously to free myself was this black void of a nightmare. Chibi Slippy, thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. All right. Like all deeply terrible dreams, it colored my thoughts for the rest of the day, and each time I had it, it got harder to shake. I tried to endure, compartmentalize, take my mental turmoil and put it in a box right unhinged across the lid, and sit back, rocking back and forth, waiting for my rescue. And that was an option, a good one. But there was one little word that stopped me from going the route of hunkering down and ignoring my own madness. Immolation. Oh. Oh. When HQ told me the date of the shuttle that would reach me, I spent quite a bit of time wondering if this wasn't just some big experiment, the sheer coincidence of it all, the magnitude of it. They'd sent the message and the subject line had 3 exclamation points, like the communications officer on the other side couldn't wait to deliver good news for once. Let their professionalism slip. They'd finally arranged a shuttle to retrieve me after it was done dropping some guys off at the ISS. I was lucky it would come so soon. A stroke of logistical genius allowed them to sneak Ben and me back without it being too conspicuous. I should be very thankful, they told me. Jesus. But I was just stunned. The date matched the one Ben had written out. Factoring in real time, I'd be entering Earth's atmosphere at the exact time the prophesized moment would come and go. Ripe for an error, misplaced heat pad, a misplaced heat pad, a mistimed thruster, something, anything to go wrong and leave me plunging to my death in a burning metal tube. Ripe for immolation. If it wasn't Ben out there tapping away, I wanted to know. I needed to know. I was a rational man, a skeptic. I did not believe the natural world would produce a man that could predict his death down to the minute or the second, nor did I believe he could predict mine. But I am only an animal. I am made of meat, vulnerable, a raw nerve in a world of jagged rocks. And I am risk adverse. That word. Immolation, not random, not chance. Up in the void surrounded by pure oxygen, fire was a constant risk. Ben's little numbers loomed large in my mind. I had to make sure everything was in place, had to make sure there were no errors. If this was a prediction, which I refused to accept at face value, then maybe I could take some heat from it. What could Ben do in the face of aneurysm? Nothing. But immolation, fire, an accident, that sort of thing could be avoided, just so long as everything was in working order. Just so long as everything was where it was meant to be. What did HQ know? Cameras and remote operators. Not enough. No one else was in that tin can except me. Why even have humans in space if you wouldn't trust their instincts and judgment? I needed to know what was making that noise. I needed to get out there. Oh, God. Is he gonna go out? Really? He's really gonna go out? He doesn't have permission. All right. Wow. Thank you for 3K likes on TikTok. Okay, 1 second. All right. HQ caught on too late. I was inside the suit, the airlock cycling by the time they realized. I chose my timing well. Halfway through my maintenance shift, Told them I was taking a look at the suit, making sure everything was in order. Meant they were slow to catch on to what I was doing. Technically, they could stop the process at any stage. They could do anything from their side, but I threatened to force a manual override that would shut them out of the part of the system. They told me they'd court martial on return, but that was a piss weak threat. For me, the stakes were higher than a court martial. In the end, they backed down. Know how hard it is to build a space station in secret? It came first. If the spacewalk went wrong and I died, the station would still be there. $1 billion asset awaiting the next top secret mission. It was my neck on the line, not theirs. I accepted it. Under time pressure, HQ accepted it too. But by the time the door finally opened and I was able to gently guide myself out and around the rim so that I was clinging to the station's exterior, they'd already tapped into the cameras and were guiding me along to my destination. But it was background noise to me at that point. Their voices and little pings. Constant readouts of suit temperatures in the distance to the station hull. Meaningless, all of it. What mattered was the sound. Tap, tap, tap. They fell? What fell? Oh, in the video. They're not good at parkour. Okay. Yeah, it's okay. I was anxious by this point, or perhaps, if I'm honest, scared. Space is all extremes, not just heat, but light too. The shadows cast are vast and strange. You move in and out of the Earth's shadow like it's a hand in front of a projector, and one's cast by yourself and your surroundings are a special kind of black. The station, with its myriad of pipes and cables, was covered in abyssal shadows, long warped things with ambiguous origins. Sometimes I looked at the darkness and wondered if there was anything in there at all, or if the station was simply bisected by some kind of strange cosmic force, like I might fall into it somehow, forever lost. Normally, I think space was beautiful. Spacewalks had, for me, in the past, been an almost religious experience. They carried the same sense of weight, but for very different reasons. I felt watched, something I tried to ignore, but it got harder and harder. I kept looking over my shoulder, kept thinking every bump and vibration I felt on the station's hull. By the time I reached the place I had strapped Ben's body, I was close to a panic attack. The whole part of the station was covered in darkness, the kind where I couldn't see a damn thing. It was only HQ's voice telling me I'd reached my destination that let me know Ben was lying just a few feet from me. Under their direction, I found him, and when my light fell upon the bag itself, I saw the metallic fabric glitter with ice. Touching it, I felt Ben's frozen body inside, hard as a rock. I gave him a nudge, and he didn't move an inch. The straps holding him in place were there, firm as ever. What else could be causing the sound? I asked. There is one option. Oh, God. The nameless voice on the other end sounded reticent. But that had been the default since Ben died. HQ always sounded like they were holding something back. What's that? We're not 100% sure how corpses would respond to the changing temperatures in the vacuum. Obviously, the parts of the body will freeze and expand, fluids in particular. Right now, the bag has a lot of surface contact with the metallic hull. One theory is that blood may be freezing and sublimating as the surface beneath changes temperature. Oh my God. I looked at Bag and grimaced. How much blood exactly? We cannot possibly say for certain how much would have left the body, only that it's the bag's job to contain it until return. We are able to confirm using instruments in the station that the panel you're standing on is well below freezing. Everything should be in a manageable state, so to speak. Solid, likely one large clump. They replied, and then after a moment they added, "You wanted this. It would be a waste of resources now that you're out here not to investigate further. You need to look inside." What? Don't look inside, please. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Of course, I'd wanted this, hadn't I, to satisfy morbid curiosity, to address the rabid thoughts in my mind that kept me awake, filling me with what little sleep I had with nightmares. Now that I was at the threshold, I found myself so afraid that even moving my hand took that kind of effort. And yet I had no choice. I had to see this through. The bag opened with a specially designed zipper. No sound, but I could feel the click, click, click of the specialized teeth opening up. It's stupid, but as I unfurled the flap, I could have sworn a terrible foetid, I don't know what that word means, stench passed over me. It lasted no more than a few seconds, but it was so vivid I turned and snapped my eyes shut as they watered. Power of suggestion, I told myself as I reopened them. That was all. Nothing more. No air, no sound, no smell. I took a few deep breaths, tried not to let the incident unsettle me further, and looked inside the bag. I guess, like, the smells wouldn't travel in space, I guess. That's why he says that. I guess. Multiple people watching my video feed gasped when I made a fairly unflattering noise somewhere between a moan and a cry. I'd expected something. God, at worst, what I expected was something ghoulish. Blue skin, icicles collecting around the eyelashes like a body found in the Arctic. But Ben had transformed. Great jagged shards of frozen blood had erupted from the eyes and ears and mouth. His jaw dislocated to an unnatural angle, and an icicle the size of my forearm forced its way out. Oh my god. His neck was broken, his torso shredded with strips of flesh hanging off in ribbons, and his hands were clawing at his face with bizarre yellow nails. They'd even left grooves in his skin. This is not possible. What the fuck is this? I asked no one in particular, only to realize HQ had been talking amongst themselves the whole time. A malfunction in the bag, unexpected pressure, temperature changes. No, this isn't normal. Let's not pretend this is normal. Guys, I shouted, splitting the chatter and leaving silence. Why are his arms like that? Muscle spasms, possibly caused by, well, whatever caused the unusual reaction in his circulatory system. Maybe that causes arms to curl up towards his face. There are scratch marks on his cheeks, I replied. Skin under his nails. Are we sure he was dead when I brought him out here? Oh my god. A dozen urgent, alarmed voices, all desperate to avoid even the slightest hint of responsibility, told me no, that was not possible. But looking down at Ben's tortured face, I couldn't help but feel a bit of doubt. I was about to ask what I ought to do next when the sun rose across the station. Oh no. Oh no. Unlike Earth, this wasn't a gentle morning. It flipped like a light switch. Thankfully, the suit reacted before it had a chance to blind me, but the temperature began to rapidly climb. I watched as something beneath Ben's skin began to writhe in the new warmth. Oh no. That's definitely not normal. We can offer no further insight into the situation as of this moment. The footage you're sending us is under review by a panel of experts, HQ told me, somewhat urgently and robotically, like the person on the other end was stifling panic. Current orders are to take samples, reseal the bag, and return to the station. Are you sure I should be taking this stuff inside? There was some mumbling before the operator replied. Forget the samples, seal the bag, return to the station. Gladly, I replied before pulling the zipper shut. Oh my god. There's something in there. Oh, it's 5K? Oh, my thing is bugged again. It always bugs out. Thank you for 5K. It's okay. It's okay. We don't have, like, goals, really. I just appreciate, like, literally anything. You guys are, like, always the best. Okay. I was keen to leave, and I made my journey back faster than I should have. That crawling sensation you feel when being watched, it was all over me, made me clumsy, and I knocked myself more than once on the way back, like I was suddenly unused to the suit's controls. Just couldn't escape the notion that everywhere I looked, someone or something had darted back just out of view. Of course, that was impossible, so I told myself. What could survive out in space? But it only made it that much worse to imagine someone slinking in the shadows, tapping on the hole, stalking me every step of the way back. When I finally reached the door, the tension inside me rose. If something was going to happen, it would happen now with my back turned on infinity. I had never felt so vulnerable. Reynolds? The sound made me jump. I had been so focused on my surroundings, I'd forgotten I was being supervised by a room full of people 1,000 miles away. What is it? Reynolds, we're seeing something here we're not sure of. Being told you should hold off on returning. Oh. Oh no. I like liking because it makes others happy. Yeah, I appreciate it. I do. It's so kind. Thank you. It really helps. It helps a lot. Okay. Something about the voice on the other end made my stomach sink. They didn't just sound confused, and make no mistake when you're clinging to the side of a station on your own, confused would have been bad enough, but no, there was something else. Fear. There's an anomaly. They added. No one down here knows how to proceed. We're currently seeking input from the higher-ups. This is unprecedented. What's going on? It began with, well, signals from some of the biomonitors, specifically Ben's. That last word hit like a truck. What? Yes, and the cameras are... At first we thought they were malfunctioning. Whoa. Hi, I'm here. My TikTok always tries to assassinate me when I'm just minding my business. Okay. Yes, and the cameras are, at first we thought they were malfunctioning. It appeared as if Ben's bag was empty, and then Reynolds, we noticed something else. Guys, what's going on here? I'm being told I can't say more. Just wait. I tightened my grip on the railing, my heart pounding. Finally, the door cycled open, and I was ready to disregard all orders when the man speaking to me from HQ practically screamed in my ear. Don't enter, Reynolds. Do not enter the station. What we're seeing on the cameras, you can't let that in. If there's something out here, then I'm going to safety before it reaches me. Tap, tap, tap. I stopped. My brain processed. I'd heard that. I'd heard something in the vacuum of space. I looked around at my hands, my feet. That couldn't be possible. Not unless... Without moving my head, I turned my eyes towards the very edge of my helmet's vision and watched as a single yellow fingernail tapped gently on the glass. The man in HQ spoke in a terrifying whisper. He's on your suit. The terror that shot through me was electric, white fire coursing through my veins. Without even thinking I reacted like I had just found out there was a grenade strapped on my back. All instinct, no rationality. I cried out and swung around, trying to knock Ben off my back, but all I accomplished was setting off some alarms, and I damaged my suit. Get it off, I screamed to no one in particular. Get it off me! I thrashed desperately and felt something shuffling around the exterior of the bulky suit. Finally, my eyes fell on something useful, the jet controls. I fumbled with my hands into place and immediately blasted myself into the open pressure chamber, turning at the last minute so the back of my suit was smashed into the thick secondary door. I only hoped whatever was clinging to the back of me was destroyed by the impact, but when I looked up, Ben was still out there, gawping at me with a mouthful of frozen blood. Slowly, his movement packed with the eerie confidence of a predator, he prepared to enter the station. Reynolds, get away from the door. We're initiating emergency shutdown. Ben had one hand inside when the door slammed shut and cut it off. Even in space with the bulkhead between us, I could have sworn I heard him scream. You can't hear sound in space. Can't hear sound in space. How dare TikTok? I know. They always trying to just kill me off. I'm not the main character. There was no ignoring Ben or the sounds he made. Not anymore. Terrible thumps that battered the station, their location changing seemingly at random. This drove the people on the ground insane. Oh, I'd heard my fair share of rationalization over the last few hours. Been sent books worth of written material from every type of expert you can imagine. Ever since my colleague's death, I'd been wrestling with all sorts of bizarre thoughts. But after the spacewalk, it was like they'd spilled out of my head and were now terrorizing other like-minded skeptics. Try as they might, no one in HQ could make sense of it. But they didn't have the journal. Oh, his journal! We forgot about that. After what happened during my spacewalk, it became a priority for me to figure out what the fuck was going on. Those numbers Ben had recorded weren't gibberish. I'd known that from the start. To read them was to feel like you were reading another language, something secret and hidden. And while I never cracked the code, not even now after all this time, I figured out where Ben had found it. Light. The trick was digging deeper into Ben's research, specifically a pet project of his he'd spent nearly his entire life chasing. A little comet, a ball of ice, way out of the Kepler belt, close to where the solar system abates and the great cosmic void begins. Something small and insignificant that rotated and shifted and occasionally caught the sun, bouncing photons right back at us. A glittering snowball so faint it had to be invisible unless you happened to look at the right place at the right time. Like Ben did when he was just 10 and playing with hobbyist dad's backyard telescope. A light in the darkness, a light that spoke to a few instruments Ben had adjusted to record each little emission. Flash on, flash off, flash on, flash off, flash on, flash off, flash on. Binary to hexadecimal, and from there, God something else, something that spoke to him, something out there had spoken to him. I don't know what scared me more, the sound of a reanimated Ben pounding away at the station, an imminent all too near threat, or the thought of something in the void whispering unknown secrets to a man for the last 2 decades. An idea that occasionally rose over me like the tide, swallowing me whole if I dwelt on it for more than just a few moments. I never did figure out what the transmission was saying, but I was transfixed nonetheless. Not just by Ben's little journal that contained hundreds, thousands of handwritten records, but the live transmission he had set up on his computer, the one he'd converted into a sound. It was like an earworm on steroids, like white noise made of acid, a flood of alien ideas that left me confused and drooling if I listened too long. All told, I spent no more than a few days with access to that transmission, and by the end, I felt like I was on the verge of melting away. But Ben had been exposed to that thing since his childhood, spent years and years listening and recording and waiting, working towards something none of us could really hope to understand. I had to assume that the transmission was responsible for his death, and even worse, what had happened to him afterwards. Had it always been the reason for his coming to space? I need water. I need water. Had the Ben I known been just a sham? The sound, the light coming from out there, it felt wrong. It wasn't a gentle lull or a siren's bowl. It was dark and overpowering. Why had he given in to it? Why had he done everything it had wanted? How much of his life had been lived because of its needs and wants? One thing I could be sure of as I spent days listening to Ben's furious rampage on the exterior of the station, whatever had spoken to him, it was hostile, and it couldn't be allowed to come back with me. Reynolds, I'm being told this is going to be a bit of an unconventional pickup. I scoffed as I finished suiting up. That was an understatement. What did they tell you? I asked as I pulled the helmet down and initiated the door's opening sequence. There are concerns about contamination. Not sure what that means. Didn't say if it was biological or chemical. All sounds a little weird if you ask me. But we're meant to pick you up mid-spacewalk. Is that all right? Yep, I replied. Huh, you up for that? We're told we can come about 200 meters away, but you'll have to close the rest with the suit's thrusters. Gonna be something else for you. Untethered journey from one vehicle to the next. It's never been done before. I'm well aware of the risks, I said. Just keep your eyes peeled. This time it was his turn to scoff. For what? He cried. You'll know when you see it. Is he gonna make it? Is he gonna make it? It kind of reminds me of Alien, but like worse. I made the journey with my back to the shuttle, floating in the wrong direction at a slow but consistent speed. My eyes glued to the station, looking for some signs of Ben. There was the occasional flash of something red, a slight shimmer of movement, often obscured by some of the station's panels and antenna, that let me know that he was still on the exterior, skulking around somewhere. So long as he stayed there, I knew I'd be okay, but the entire time I kept waiting for the other foot to drop. For the tension to finally explode into that life-threatening danger I knew was waiting for me. It came as a surprise when I finally approached the shuttle without incident. Pilot told me I was a few meters away and it was time to turn around, so I did, drifting around as gently as ever, as gently as a driver returning to the surface. I had my back to the station no more than a few seconds when the pilot grunted. Huh, that's odd. Oh god. Hi! Hi, Tanak. How are you? Johnny! Hold on. I don't have Mix It Up open. I will open it for you. It's okay. I'll fix it. Hold on. I was trying to scare you. That one's just, it's like a sticky note that goes on my forehead. The scare alerts are all either in Tangia or in the, like, sub alerts and stuff. Oh, I've been talking too much. I don't talk this much ever. I'm just a professional yapper. Did that not work? Okay. We can have this one. Just drop in to say hi. Hi! How are you? How have you been? Okay. Excuse me. All right. Okay. Tired as always, but good. That's good at least. I'm glad you're good. I love your sticky note. Thank you. It's just me. Especially when I'm like stuttering through all the words. I had my back to the station no more than a few seconds when the pilot grunted. Huh, that's odd. He sounded nonchalant, but the object that hit me was anything but minor. Ben, uninterested in making the journey safely, had launched himself off the station as fast as he could, and with no way of slowing down, he hit me at full speed, slamming me up against part of the door frame and sending us both tumbling out into the void before anyone even had the time to register his attack. This time, I was not letting me get a this time he was not letting me get a door between us. He scrambled over my suit like a deranged insect, one that I had desperately tried to swat away as the great void spun around us both. Stars turned into lines, the shuttle swooping past my helmet's field of view in almost random directions. It was sickening and terrifying, and I hoped to God I'd be able to correct the spin before it got out of control, but all of that came second to the monster who was clinging to my suit. At some point, he crawled around in such a way that I got a good look at him, the first in a few days. It was up close, personal. Even with the helmet's glass between us, I could make out such stark detail that I momentarily froze in terror, aware only vaguely of the pilot's panic transmission. Oh God. Jesus Christ, what the fuck is that thing? Reynolds, you need to get yourself stabilized much further and we won't be able to help. And whatever you do, you need to know the fucking thing isn't coming aboard this shuttle. I wanted to reply, but I was busy trying to get an arm between me and Ben, who was now a profusion of jagged red crystals of varying sizes. Something as big as a kitchen knife, others like sewing needles. A spacesuit's worst nightmare. A puncture wouldn't lead to immediate decompression, you're probably thinking of. Instead, I've had a few moments at most before the air enveloping the suit dissipated, and after that, my lungs would collapse, my blood would start to boil, and the water inside my eyes, nose, ears, and other soft tissues would vaporize and try to escape, like frostbite on fast forward. But punctures weren't my sole concern. I knew I had to stop Ben's hands getting a grip on the helmet. I don't know if whatever had animated him had access to all his memories, but Ben sure as shit knew how to remove a helmet from the exterior, so all my focus went on keeping his nasty little fingers away from my neck. A puncture would still leave me enough time to return the shuttle, but with no helmet, I'd be doomed to a very painful death. Bro, don't die. So I fought the best I could, knowing everything hinged on me pushing him away. But Ben was lithe and insectile, constantly slipping out of reach whenever I got close to giving him a good shove. His fingers could easily find purchase on the suit and its many little greebles, while I was basically wielding oven gloves that offered no dexterity. I had no hope of shaking him off the usual way, but I did have something on my side, inertia. The whole time we'd been spinning furiously and the rotational force was just about the only thing trying to peel the two of us apart. So far I'd been fighting it, but why? I just realized at the last moment I had one option left, so I jammed half thrusters and decided to make the nearly out of control spin much, much worse. Normally, an uncontrolled spin is one of those nightmare scenarios any astronaut dreads. Humans are regularly shaped, and once you start rotating along more than one axis, applying more force is just likely to make it worse. Correcting takes a huge amount of experience and insight, and even then, there's no guarantee you can stop it. More likely is that by the time you figure out what you need to do, the rotational forces will have you on the brink of unconsciousness, and from there, death is just one stone's throw away. Okay, here's the thing about this. I'm gonna have to fact check all of this because of this guy is actually spitting straight facts. How do you know so much about it? Are you an astronaut? Like, have you been in space? It's like it's a little bit too much information here. Like very detailed. Holy crap. For me, it was the only choice I had. So I accelerated the spin and kept accelerating, holding the button down until the forces at play pulled Ben further and further towards the front of the suit. That's where inertia wanted us. Two objects in near symmetry, ready to break off in opposite directions at any moment. Ben held on for longer than I did. At some point, my limbs went weak, my vision dark, and my arms fell to my side, no longer able to fight the monster off. But by then, it took everything Ben had just to cling on to me, and he could no longer attack or fumble with the helmet. Ugh. Eventually, he had to give in as the spin grew faster and faster, and the forces trying to separate us grew too strong. It was like every roller coaster I had been on merged into one and ramped up to 11. The last thing I remember before I lost consciousness was the sight of Ben's monstrous face being flung off into the void. I came to aboard the shuttle. Several men and women crowded around me. Jesus Christ, you're a lucky son of a bitch. I groaned and made my eyes towards the person who had spoken. It sounded like the pilot. Nice to put a face to the voice. I don't feel lucky, I gasped. You spun right towards us. We were already suited up and on our way, timed up well. That suit was riddled with holes. Any later and we wouldn't have been around to catch you and get you into safety. As it is, pal, you're going home. Medical check shows no real issues. I think you're going to be okay. Oh no. Where's Ben? The people around me shared a funny look before one of them realized. Benjamin Watale? I don't know how to say his last name. The other astronaut on board. Is that who was attacking you? I nodded. Well, he's gone. If that really was your colleague, we're sorry. I feel like there's a story we're missing. I'll catch you up when I'm feeling better, I coughed. Well, whatever happened to him, he'll be re-entering Earth's atmosphere in the next hours, the pilot replied. What then? I asked. The pilot thought for a second. Human body on re-entry? He'll go up in flames. Immolation. Whoa. It wasn't his death. It was his second death. That's crazy. He predicted it. Predicted it perfectly. He was never going to die the whole time. He was all scared for nothing. This will be the last one for today. This is called There's a Customer That None of Us Are Allowed to Serve. It's on Reddit nosleep. I work at the Lone Star Diner, off the road from Carson City to Reno. Oh, that's in Nevada. Wait, is it? I don't know. I think so. Diner name has of course been changed for obvious reasons. More on that later. Why do I work at the Lone Star Diner off the road from Carson City to Reno? Well, because, kind stranger, my life plans didn't work out. Generally, if you're caught working at a diner past college, specifically one in the middle of nowhere, it might mean things aren't going so hot. But still, why this diner? Why Lone Star specifically? I'm aware you probably aren't actually asking these questions, but I nonetheless believe they deserve a response. Of all the diners in the world, what makes Lone Star so special is the pay. The pay is fucking great. There are maybe 10 other diners within a 30-minute drive of where I live. Most of them average out to a little over minimum wage. Meanwhile, Lone Star is whipping up a mean $50 an hour. And that hourly rate is due to one single solitary reason, no matter what anyone tells you, because of him. My first day on the job was fine, more or less. I'd worked customer service before, so I felt like I could run with the strange surprises that came unique to diners. I was able to adapt to the inconsistency of the rules pretty quickly. Unwritten rules like some areas in the restaurant need to be spotless at all times. Others, boss lady couldn't give less of a shit about. Serve customers quickly, but not too quickly, asshole. Customers here don't actually like it when you show up too fast. Give them some time to feel the floor under their boots, to miserably stare ahead and mourn what could have been. You know, diner stuff. They're actually here because they want to be alone. Pardon the contradiction. Of course, vaguely defined, whispered only by ghosts, rules extend to the cooks as well. If you were somehow secretly celebrity chef Marco Pierre White in the flesh, your mandate was to keep your damn prowess to yourself. Your job is to make the classics as decently as possible. Not bad, but not amazing. Just poor enough to be really good, and that's what the customers are here for. Okay, valid. And as the weeks unfolded, I rose, or I suppose crouched, to the occasion quite well. You want intentional, pinpoint precision mediocrity? You've come to the right person. Most of the patrons just wanted coffee and brunch, brought to them at medium speed with semi-predictable cadence of a waiter or waitress who checks in afterwards. Done, done, and done. Not one for subtlety, one day I finally decided to ask my boss the question in the middle of the shift. I didn't want to ruin a good thing by doubting it, but fuck me if I wasn't a little curious. Not a full look at the gift horse's mouth, more of a skeptical side eye. Why $50 an hour? She didn't even look up from her task at the register, methodically counting out bills. Set it on your first day. You've got to be good at following rules. And when it's an important rule, you better be damn well perfect. High expectations here. I made a face. Right. High expectations. You think I'm joking? No, ma'am. I guess I just. Why did I even speak up? I just think you're running a really cool operation here. Cooler than you might realize. It's still work, but the whole thing seems fair. Christ, my waffling skills were abysmal. Add that to the list of intentional mediocrity. Booyah. That's me. She looked up from her duties and shot me a stern look. I don't run this ship, and following the rules here means that you take care of yourself. I'm sorry. I'm your employer, sure, and I'll pay you when you to be here, sure, but you should be aware there's plenty more going on here than just you in this diner. She glanced down at her watch, then sighed. I usually save this speech for the end of the month, but since you already caught me halfway through it, so the Coles notes, do they mean like the I don't remember what it's called. If you don't think you have it in you to follow instructions clearly, without protest and without asking too many questions, then you should leave. Quit. No harm, no foul. A week's worth of pay on the house. The conversation sputtered shortly after that. I tried to find an opening to ask more about what she meant, but she was closed off to the topic moving forward. You know what? That was fine. If she wanted me to put my head down and just do work, I could do that. And work I did. And things were good. Mundane small tasks with the customers was fun. My coworkers were friendly, and I was getting paid well. I found a place to park the failures of my life, a place to build from. It might have been Saturday, I think, when I first noticed him. An occupied seat in the far corner of the diner. No idea how long he'd been sitting there waiting, though he certainly looked patient. I had the strange inkling he'd been left hanging for quite some time, though I couldn't actually remember seeing him enter. Brown corduroy short hair, mid-50s it seemed. A reasonably calm smile. Normal-looking dude. I started making my way out from the back and headed towards him. Immediately, I felt a tight grip on my arm. I just saw him moving from my peripheral. It was Melanie, my boss, with a forceful clutch enough to make me drop my notepad. Her fingers tightened around my forearm, sharply pinching my skin. Important rules, she said. What? You remember our chat about rules? This is the most important one, okay? Okay. That man over there in the corner, she motioned to the man who had caught my attention, sitting upright, hands softly clasped together, coy smile on his face. You don't go up to him. You don't say a word to him. But he's a customer? Her hold intensified. She was hurting me, almost as if she was taking out some sort of unseen anger on me. Hold on. Kitty cat. Come here, kitty cat. Hi. My kitty's here. Okay. I'd like to ask you right now to be smart enough to not ask questions and just follow instructions. You don't go to his table. You don't talk to him. You can look at him. You can shout across the room at him if you'd like, though I can't imagine why you'd ever need to do that. But you do not approach him, and you do not take his order. Or a sharp exhale through the nose, a shake of a head, and a glare from my manager. It's different every time, but it ain't pretty. I watched him from the short distance I'd been afforded. It was hard not to. She did too. Unlike the other customers here, I didn't get a sense that he was here to be alone, to reminisce, or to take part in the comfort ritual of lackluster eggs Benedict over rye. Instead, I had the sense that he was just curious. Mild-mannered, content, but curious. My shift ended not too long after, so I didn't actually get a chance to watch him leave. Regardless, the experience of seeing him and learning about the rule he was connected to left a bizarre, dampening feeling on my mood. I liked my job. I liked coming home and unwinding. I didn't mind being in the middle of nowhere. It felt nice to look up to the empty sky filled with stars, to see them shimmer and shine, and occasionally shoot across. I made a wish that things in my life would stay simple. Damn. Don't serve the guy at that booth, y'all. That's a bad idea. Where's my cat? Kitty cat. Oh, you look so sweet. All right. I started to get a sense of his cadence. Usually he'd show up once a month. The rare times I got to see him, I'd try to squeak in the odd question of my boss. Questions like, who is he? Where does he come from? And has anyone spoken with him? All mechanically met with, I don't know, and if you're scared, you're welcome to quit. Then, as fate would have it, one day my boss fell incredibly ill. My coworkers and I had to convince her to go home midway through her shift. Her sickness falling uncomfortably within the usual 1 to 3 day window at the end of the month when our customer would typically appear. And of course, there he was right after she went home. To my benefit, the other waiters and waitresses were working round the rounds were well aware of his presence and knew exactly what to do when he arrived. All of them knew to steer clear of him. Nevertheless, driven by a foundational curiosity and that I just couldn't shake, I used this opportunity to go for it. I shouted a single thing across the floor, knowing Melanie wasn't there to chide me. God. Hello, sir. What brings you here? He turned his head from his fixed position in his seat to put his hand to his ear. Clever. I said, what brings you here? I called out again, a few notches louder this time, garnering some odd looks from our Thursday patrons. To my surprise, he spoke back. I'm not sure why I was expecting his voice to carry the tone of some twisted, demented demon, maybe the fear Melanie had instilled in me, but the man sounded exactly how he looked. I'm sorry, dear, he said. I'm afraid I'm not sure what you're saying. Can you come over here and ask me again? Nope, I was good. And I don't mean to be rude about this service, he continued, but it feels as if no one has taken my order for quite some time now. Oh. I let the exchange end there, diverting my attention back to the other guests. As always, he'd eventually disappear without fanfare, without the clatter of the entrance bell, or any sight or sound of his steps across the diner floor. Our backroom conversations about him remaining dreadfully short while he was there, just he's here and he's gone. And the odd, when we really need to say it, I feel really weird about that. It took me a while to understand where my brazenness to address this strange middle-aged man came from. In truth, I was just afraid. His presence and all of the questions tied to his being at our diner were disrupting this otherwise great arrangement that I felt I had. It seemed right, in the moment, to stand at the very edge of bravery and say something to him. Of course, now that was gone, I just felt worse. Now that he was gone, I just felt worse. Oh, where was I? I lost my place. Oh. The next week, I was invited to something pretty interesting at work. I generally have a good amount of visibility into what Melanie, boss lady, does on a daily basis. The only element that remained elusive was her bi-weekly check-in with a particularly sharp-dressed, agent-looking fella. There was a pretty consistent presence of state troopers, agents, and similarly uniformed men and women dropping to the diner, though I seldom paid mind beyond simply noticing it. Got you to 10K? Thank you! Midway through wiping down the tables, only an hour or so into my shift, Mel swung by and said, Hey, want you in the meeting with the big boss if you have a few. The big boss? Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Coming. Just, if you don't mind me asking, who is... She let her eyes speak her unwritten rules to me. Questions equals generally bad. Thank you for the reminder, ma'am. We maneuvered into a back room and sat at a table. Across from us, already seated, was a man in a sharply tailored suit with a subtle earpiece in, the aforementioned agent. The table was littered with a small, messy stack of notes, papers, and documents. He made it a point to size me up, staring me down uninterrupted like a deer to headlights, no concern at all about how awkward he was making it for me. Then he turned to Melanie. How long has she been here? He asked her in his gruff western drawl. My cat just attacked my leg. Holy shit. 6 months, she said. You trust her? I trust her. Yes. He let his eyebrows say, if you say so, then went on with it. All right, so apparently you had a visit from the wandering man last week. You, he said, motioning to Melanie, were out, but you, his attention now shifted to me, weren't. Give me the lowdown. The wandering man? The agent caught the confusion in my eyes. Jesus, you've told this girl nothing, haven't you? He said to Melanie. Sir, I know it sounds weird, she said, but I personally feel as if the man is almost, I don't know, drawn to curiosity. Like, maybe the less I say to those not already in the know, the better. The wandering man, the agent cut her off, is our nickname for the fellow that sits in the corner of your fine little establishment. Or should I say, the state's fine little establishment. I'm sorry? I asked. That's correct. The state's. Congratulations, ma'am. You're part of a government operation. The wandering man, not just a cutesy little nickname, but our legal definition of this tricky little problem, is a phenomenon we discovered many years ago. At the time, he just walked the desert landscape, chatting up unsuspecting strangers with bizarre questions. Everything fine, all hunky-dory. A little weird, sure, but nothing illegal. However, sometimes things would happen because of him. Bizarre things. Grisly things. I could see Melanie groaning, concerned at the picture being painted. Would this pique my curiosity? Have you guys, taken him in for. I almost wanted to cut off my own stupid question, but he ran with it. Nope, not because we don't want to, but because rather it might not be safe. The cozy mental image I'd held off of this diner was starting to fracture. We have a reason to believe that he's a visitor, he said. From? Oh god, what's he doing? Gimli! Hold on. Hey. Hi. That's not yours. Oh. Oh no. I'm sorry, my cat was trying to eat the food. Okay. I didn't attend another debrief after that. Not because I was barred, mind you. Rather, I just didn't want to know anymore. My gut no longer held curiosity. There was just a low, aching dread there now. The agents and troopers, spaced out and seated amongst the eatery, were now just a glaring reminder that what my dingy diner job really was. The government cavalry would mostly show up around the end of the month window the wandering man was set to arrive in. When he'd appeared, they wouldn't do much more than examine him from the distant tables, subtly scribbling notes onto notebooks. He'd always act the same. He would just sit there. He wouldn't give them, or us, the diner employees, much to go on. Speaking of employees, I remembered something Melanie told me after my first month of working here, that the worker turnover in this diner was incredibly high. Knowing at the time what everyone got paid, it made absolutely no sense to me. Now, 7 months into the gig, alongside a completely new set of cooks, waiters, and waitresses from when I'd first started, I'd seen firsthand just how true that statement was. None of the leavers claimed as much, but I'm sure the underlying premise of who the diner was really for became subconsciously clear to them during their time here, and it probably didn't sit all too well with them. He's trying to get out. I stayed, but not because of the pay. Actually, I'm not sure why I did. We had a new cast of rookie employees now, the ones who understood the vague terms of the situation just as Melanie, I, and all former employees did stuck around. Those who couldn't reconcile the situation with their inherent curiosity naturally filtered out. And then there was Malcolm. It was only his first week. He was a keener, mega keener. He'd bulldozed through a giant list of tasks and was already asking for the next batch of work to chew through. Anything he could get ahead of, anything he could step in for, anything he could learn, he was on it. He wanted to be as helpful as humanly possible. I think the salary of the role for a guy his young age was just too alluring for him. For our part, Melanie and I tried our best to get him to pace himself. We were both giving the spiel now. By this point, we'd more or less perfected it. There are certain things about this diner that are strange, rules you will have to follow and not think about. Rules that are concrete, immutable, and non negotiable, like gravity. He nodded. At that moment, I really believed he was internalizing my words. And if that doesn't work for you, and if you don't think you can take care of yourself, then you shouldn't work here, I continued. There was always a visceral feeling in my stomach whenever I saw the wandering man in the corner during the same week that we were onboarding new staff. I'm sure Melanie felt it too. On those days, Mel and I would both work the till, and if we saw anyone coming out from the back, we'd stop them with a simple grab of an arm. Your cat is plotting against you, I know. He's just sitting here now. Malcolm stepped out, and I did just that, a rough grasp of his forearm, just like Melanie had done to me when I'd first started. He recoiled in surprise. Remember that little chat about rules we just had? I said. He nodded meekly, as if he was already in trouble. I pointed to the man seated at the far table in the brown corduroy shirt, staring straight ahead with what I believed at the time no real reason to be here, and said, "You will not, under any conditions, serve that man. Don't go up to him. Don't talk to him. Pretend he doesn't exist." Malcolm lifted the garbage bag he was holding in his left hand. In my nervousness, I hadn't actually clocked what he was stepping out for. Oh god, stretch break? Hold on. "Just doing garbage duty, ma'am," he said, but understood, and then left out the front door with his usual swagger. The dumpster wasn't as close as we would have liked, so I appreciated his willingness to take on this duty so soon in his employment. I returned back to observing the wandering man. We had a crowd of agents in attendance that day, scattered about the restaurant. The one The man wasn't one to speak up often. Today was an interesting exception. Officers, he said, if you have any questions, feel free to join me at the table to ask them. The agents around the room reacted with mainly snickers. Seriously, if you come sit with me, I'll be happy to spill it all. Truly. Even more laughs. But no one bit. And yet he continued, pointedly. I know you're curious. I know you take notes. I know you talk about me. I know you built this establishment for me. I know you. As I reconciled the fact that this was the most words I've ever heard him string together in succession, I heard the chime of a bell. The door is open. Malcolm was dusting his hands as he entered through the diner's side door, a door which was situated right beside the table the watering man was seated at. It all happened so fast, and yet it played out in front of me excruciatingly slowly, as if there was a moment, a single solitary second where I could have stepped in. Are you falling asleep, baby? The wandering man dropped any pretext of exchange with the agents, stopping his sentence midway and adopting a completely new demeanor. He played the role of a low, miserable, tired man and said, 30 visits, terrible service every time, in a pathetic tone just as Malcolm walked by. Malcolm instinctively plucked a notepad out from his chest pocket and turned his head to face the man. Hey, I got you, Chief. I can have him ring something up for you. What are you? And then Malcolm froze in place, and the wandering man's expression turned Cheshire cat-wide. His neck alternated between tensing and fluttering with what seemed to be undeniable excitement. The man had started getting up from the table, and then, immediately, both of them were gone. Malcolm and the Wanderer had vanished out of existence entirely. The insanity of the moment was erupted by the coded language I heard blared over the megaphone, nonsensical agent speak that had been seared into my memory forever. Alert level black. Wandering target has compromised a civilian. I repeat, civilian has been compromised. And that was that. Melanie quit in the days after. She wasn't mad at me. She told me she always knew she'd leave after the 10th disappearance. Why that specific milestone was required, I have no clue. All I could do from that point was continue to work. On my commutes home or during lunch breaks, I would look up at the stars and put on the wish that Malcolm be brought back home, but back from wherever he'd been taken. The debrief with the agents brought me no solace. The exchange was simple and short. Where was he taken to? Answered with, he's gone now. With a perpetual dagger in my soul now, I only had the smallest of silver linings, if you could even call it that. A lesson. The lesson that I needed to be even more watchful, even more diligent, and on days that the wandering man was visiting the only server at the diner. No exceptions. I knew the agents weren't happy about that. None of them said it to me explicitly, but I could tell the way they would learn something new about him every time he whisked away someone after a mistake was made. It was weird. Darwinian. Oh, it was a weird Darwinian setup they had created, where a zoo. Oh my god, I'm glad this is almost over because I'm starting to fuck up more. We were a zoo that they could use to learn more about a specific animal, a specific entity, a specific visitor. No dice, they just have to watch him sit now, or wait for him to do something different. I waited for the 3-day stretch at the end of the month when he usually appears in. Things were quiet up to that point. When he finally showed up, it wasn't what I expected. For the first time ever, I saw the wandering man walk right through the front door, in the dead of night at the tail end of my shift. I was at the till, paralyzed, and he took step after step to close the distance. And then he was right there, standing in front of me. And I was sure, absolutely sure, that I was going to die. He smiled. Don't worry, I have my own little set of rules I play by, he said. I didn't say a word. This was no man's land right now. I know you've been curious about me. I've admired it from the moment you first spoke up to address me. Cautious curiosity is a great thing to see in someone, especially in such a reckless species. Please just go. I'd like to answer a question about why I'm visiting. I'm sure you'd like to know why I'm here, right? I'm not curious anymore. I swear I'm not. He laughed. The answer is really painfully simple. This little game, this little charade that I'm playing, is just so unbelievably fun. Please don't kill me. Please. You truly have a wonderful planet. I will return again soon. Promise. Give me a month, maybe 2 this sign. A sincere, kind smile delivered with kind eyes. I'll come back with a new game. And then he was gone. It took me a minute to realize that there was a cake box sitting on the counter beside me. Maybe it was there the whole time when he was speaking to me. Maybe it materialized right after he left. Oh no. Oh no. I opened the box to find Malcolm's severed head, a blank expression on his face, sitting on a bed of poorly and confusing organized flowers, almost as if there was an intention to create a floral arrangement, but no understanding of what something like that looked like. On top of the horrific display, written in almost childlike handwriting, was a note that read, "I brought him back, just like you wished." The worst thing about being trapped at a diner in the middle of nowhere is that you realize that there really is nowhere else to run to. Every single part of our planet is blanketed by stars, by open sky. Someone could drop in at any time. Whoa. Whoa.